स्टार्ट स्ट्रीमिंग किया ही नहीं था. Okay, now visible. Okay. So good evening all of you. I am going to very quickly start with what we were doing. We have to very quickly finish this American and the Russian school of thought. I am unable to grasp W.M. Davis time space substitution approach. Can you please tell about that? Right now I am not going to tell you because that will come at appropriate place, time space substitution approach. So you will understand that there. Here there is no need. You just mug it up at this point of time. It will take extra 15 minutes for me to explain, and again it would come in more detail later on. Okay. So we have already talked about how W.M. Davis, if you talk about, was essentially a determinist, and his conception of ontography, and ontography is one term where you can expect that a short note essentially can be asked. ठीक है. So Mark Jefferson, another important scholar of the period was Mark Jefferson, and he was essentially student of Davis, and despite being student of Davis, he was opposed to the systematic geography and favored more of a regional geography. So can you see that people in the same period, how they were contradicting each other, dichotomies and dualisms were present? Yes or no? Tell me. Did we see that the American school was more associated with dichotomies, dualism, which were present there? Unlike what was the clear-cut case of German school, which was associated with determinism and systematic geography, French school, which was associated with the possibilism, regional geography and human geography. Here there was all kind of variety and full development of dichotomy and dualism. Okay, are we clear about this point? So he prepared monographs on regional geography of European countries, particularly Chile and Brazil, and he emphasized that geography should study man on earth and not the other way around, that is earth on man. Okay, so the geography should be doing what? Geography should study man on earth and not the other way around. Thus he had distinct influence of the French school and the possibilistic approach. In fact, he supported, so very clearly his approach was what? It was more possibilistic, which was opposed to what was the approach of Davis. He supported an extreme form of possibilism. And you can understand, tell me, can I say, have you heard about this word? Great American Dream. सुना है सभी ने? The Great American Dream. How many of you have heard about this term? The Great American Dream. So, you know, America was nothing but extension of Europe, more specifically Britain, France. Yes, Trump has been using it repeatedly, and it has become very political in recent times. But very clearly, what was the case? Because that was the time when Europeans were migrating, or when the Europeans were migrating to America, they were already facing in Europe lots of problems. We will see that, like the developing countries of today, the countries of the West, countries of Europe were facing that problem because they were experiencing very high population growth. So during the period of high population growth, actually what happens, that there are the population resource ratio get imbalanced, and thus there is lots of poverty, there is lots of other associated miseries which are there, very common like slums, etc., were present in case of Europe. So people, when they were migrating to America, they were migrating with a very great dream that will ultimately make it a dreamland where there would be prosperity for all, there would be no problems, there would be living standards for all the people would be high. So tell me, most of these people, the culture which would have developed in America, overall, can I say would it had been more possibilistic culture? Yes or no? The society, the cultural influence, can I say, would have been a more possibilistic kind of thing. Okay. So again, this influence was also seen on some of the scholars which were there, which were more connected with the people. Like for example, Mark Jefferson. Davis was a different kind of person. He was, in fact, you can say he was more of a physical geographer. So he was more of not too much connected with the people. But people like Jefferson, who used to work in the field of human geography, who were more, if you talk about connected with the people, they had this kind of possibilistic orientation. So अब याद रहेगा about Mark Jefferson? Yes or no? Tell me. And Mark Jefferson we have to read basically because of his concept of primate city. So primate city concept is directly mentioned in the syllabus of settlement geography. So we will be studying there. Mark Jefferson essentially was a human geographer who basically had a possibilistic orientation and more extreme form of possibilistic orientation. Okay? So he believed that equality, etc., everything can be achieved. Then next comes Isaiah Bowman. He also favored possibilistic view of geography and believed that scientific status of the subject could be guaranteed by study of immediate reality by direct observation. And this reality was to be studied through the phenomena of causality, cause-effect relationship he was talking about, but still his viewpoint was more possibilistic. Thus he emphasized on the Buffon's approach and tried to move geography towards new geography, which earlier had been initiated by W.M. Davis. Despite this similarity, that means he was, if you talk about, he was more of what? He was more of systematic geographer. Systematic geographer. But despite this similarity, one belonged to the possibilistic and the humanistic school of geography. His probabilistic ideas became more explicit after the Peruvian expedition, where he found that the human's creative enterprises can also find expression in extreme desert environments like Atacama. His possibilistic viewpoint always involved the concept of physical limitations. In a way, his ideas were more Kantian, in that he sought to balance the new freedom of human bounded by the realities of environment. So he was more like kind of a balanced view. Bowman. Okay. So another one having possibilistic viewpoint, and all these people were present during the same period when Davis was also present. So Davis couldn't influence these two people, and whether it was Jefferson or Bowen, he couldn't influence them. However, there were others who had strong influence of Davis, and very important was Ellsworth Huntington. So he was disciple of Davis and forerunner of deterministic thought in America. He recognized that previous geological time history was influenced by periods of glaciation and deglaciation. He stressed the importance of climate on human activities. Climate on human activities, very important key thing about the Huntington. He began the paradigm of, very important keyword here, climatic determinism. Can you understand the difference between environmental determinism and climatic determinism? Can I say climatic determinism is a subset of environment determinism? True or false? Climatic determinism is a subset of environmental determinism. When you are talking about environmental determinism, you are taking into all the elements of environment or more broad elements of parameters of environment. ठीक है. But when you are talking about climatic determinism, you are exclusively focusing upon one aspect which affects, that is the climatic effect. So he has written a number of books, like for example, Pulse of Asia explained how much impact climate had on the migration of Mongoloid races, which ultimately led to the conquest of China as well as parts of India. In his book, another book he has written, Civilizations and Climate, he carried forward the climatic determinism theme and cited world examples to prove the phenomena. For example, he believed that tropical climatic conditions of monotonous heat forbid attainment of higher levels of civilization. Cool temperate environments influenced by maritime moderating influence led to highly developed civilization. So this climatic determinism developed in America as environmental determinism. So it was a subset of environmental determinism. So his focus was more on what? How climate ultimately affects the cultures, the civilizations, the activities of the people. Like you might have also seen many times, now we are so much habituated actually also, that when you are in the summer season and you are sitting, can I say normally we urban people today are very much used to becoming the habit of air conditions. Yes or no? देखा होगा. And when there is no air conditions, what happens? Mind is like not working properly. We are not feeling to our best. We are more like lethargic. So this is what here Huntington says. Huntington is, when he is talking about the development of civilizations and cultures, he believed that the maritime temperate environment, like the British type of climate, is the climate which is best for human growth, because it is not too much cold and it is not too much hot. It is always having a moderate type of influence. In summers, it is comparatively warm, it never reaches 0 degree. In winters, in winters it never reaches 0 degree. In summers, it never becomes too much hot. Okay, so in Britain, if you talk about, the summers are like the winters of India, northern India. Okay, so northern means plains, in Indo-Gangetic plains. So again, if you talk about, there is a very moderate type of climate to be found. As a result, the mind works very properly. This is the reason so much thinkers, this is the reason so much research has come out of this region, and that has led to the advancement of civilization. Okay, so that was the basic ideas of Ellsworth Huntington. Another person was Ellen Semple, and she is very, very important, because we'll talk about this paradigm of, or the subset of determinism, that is environmental determinism, and she can be called as the founder of this environmental determinism, although environmental determinism was present before her also, but the specific name environmental determinism was to be first time used by her, and she was disciple of Ratzel and very much influenced by the volume 1 of Anthropogeography. She published several books, including the American History and its Geographic Conditions 1. Her best known book is Influence of Geographic Environment. And in these books, what she has done, she elaborates her idea of environmental determinism. So she points out that man was product of Earth's surface. You see the wordings she is using. The man was, yes, she has done PhD in Ratzel. Man was product of Earth's surface, a child of the earth, dust of her dust, which had entered into his bones and tissues. So much extreme thoughts. Dust of the dust of nature. She compares humans to dust of the dust of nature or environment. So very clearly for her, environment is much superior to the human beings. And that was essentially what that is the crux of environmental determinism. However, she still respects human endeavors and enterprise, which she become clear when she states the example of Anglo-Saxons of Kentucky Mountain in US. She found that their cultural characteristics persisted despite the change in environment, and she describes them as inextinguishable, this characteristic as inextinguishable excellence. Okay? So, you can understand that despite having a very staunch position on the man-nature relationship, human-environment relationship, she still has that wisdom to recognize the other side of the coin as well. And tell me how and why she was recognizing this other side of the coin as well. What could be the main reason? Anyone? कोई बता सकता है? Why she still recognize the human element when she is talking about dust and offer dust, etc., etc. Yes, very good, Yogesh. Both of you are correct. In fact, one, she was a geographer. Most importantly, she was a geographer, and geographers they are trained in this tradition of balance between environment and the human relationship. That is one. And secondly, definitely she still had the influence of Ratzel. So, although her tone had become more extreme, her writings had become more extreme than Ratzel, despite that she still had this tendency or still had that influence of Ratzel, of that kind of achieving that balance. Although she was clearly, she is not for the balance, she gives more weightage to the environment, but she does not disregard totally the human endeavor. Okay, she still says that human endeavor can become important at places. Although we'll see that later when people will be coming, they would just try to show that human endeavor is not very important. Okay, so she is Ellen Semple. There were others like Albert Perry Brigham. He was another environmental determinist who followed Daviesian tradition. So, follower of Davis. In his book Geographic Influence in History, he calls for taking pragmatic approach about geographic influence and their control. However, he explicitly rejected the climatic determinism, as he felt that it was totality of environment which was influencing the human activities. Okay, climate is just one factor. For example, tell me, can I say that suppose you take the foothills of the Himalayas, Himalayan foothills, पढ़ा है हमने Himalayan foothills के बारे में? Yes or no? Tell me. And in the Himalayan foothills, we find that there is heavy precipitation taking place. If you remember, the Himalayan foothills are receiving precipitation somewhere between 100 to 200 centimeter, and in the northeastern part even more than that. Despite this heavy precipitation, there are several areas in this region which experience water scarcity. So, what could be the reason why they are experiencing water scarcity? Tell me. Mainly because these areas are what? There is topography is which type? Mountainous topography, made up of hard rocks and very steep slopes. So, you combine hard rocks with steep slopes. Can I say most of the water would run off and there would be less water which would be retained? सीधी सी बात है, ठीक है. So again, he is very clear, he very clearly says that it is not just climate which is affecting the human activities. In fact, it is totality of environment, totality of geography geographical environment which is affecting the human life or human activities. So, can you understand the ideas of Brigham? There was another, and this is important name, Barrows. He developed the ecological studies in American geography. ठीक है, ecology, science of ecology. He also developed a very important theme, human ecology. So हमारे syllabus में environmental geography में there is one chapter by the name of influence or human adaptations, human ecological adaptations. So human ecological adaptations are mainly related with what? Human ecology. So he also developed this human ecology where he carefully studied man's adjustment to natural environment, how humans adjust to the natural environment. As a result, he rejected the paradigm of determinism, as he was of the view that geography should concentrate on study of human associations with its natural environment, how they are living in more harmony with natural environment rather than environment dominating human beings. So according to him, geography should try to develop themes which are leading towards synthesis, you see, between human environment relationship, and insisted that physical conditions must be studied in relation to human beings. Okay, so can you understand that during this period we very clearly find that he was trying to achieve this balance, and being an ecologist, can I say he would have studied many areas where humans would have led to degradation? Yes or no? Being an ecologist, he would have studied several areas where there would have been lots of degradation of the environment done by the human activities. Like America was very infamous for this, you know. And if you talk about this, okay, so if you talk about this, it was very obvious that he would go for a balanced relationship between human and environment. So that is the case of Barrows. Okay, are we clear about this? The case of Barrows. Jubilee is saying that issues faced with the app. The thing is, we told you before only that there was an update, and because of the update there are several things which have been not up to the mark. Main problem has been, I'll tell you what is the main problem. The main problem has been that your update might not be complete because of some reason or other. The update might not be complete, so that is why you are facing this problem. I have told you, that is why हमने जब वो 3 दिन का break था, we sent several times, we were sending links to register your complaints. Register कर लो अपना complaint, but most of the people are sleeping. They will not check the app during that period. And again, during the class, these problems will creep in. Okay, so that was the period. Now, you see here what is written. Till 1920 or First World War mainly, environmental determinism was dominant in US, but with emergence of Carl Sawyer, the scene or the conditions changed. So, see what actually happened. We said, if you remember, हमने देखा है that modern period, we divided modern period which started from 1859 to late 1980s, a long period of time. So, in this modern period, there was first the early period, early modern period. 3 दिन से भेज रहे हैं, हो सकता है कि मे बी they forgot to send you on your Telegram group, but I am seeing this links to be sent from 3 days here. What you talking about? Early modern period. And we have seen that early modern period also we divided into two parts. And the early modern period was mainly, first part of the early modern period was कब था? Tell me. It was mainly the 19th century, and here the developments were mainly focused where? In Europe. Then came this period, the second part of the early modern period, and this was the first 2 decades of 20th century. So here the development shifted to Anglo America. Okay. So till this period, early modern period, we were talking about that there was lots of dichotomy dualism going on, and this dichotomy dualism during this period, we can say dichotomy between the environmental determinism or simply determinism versus possibilism. Can we say that? And during this period, another dichotomy which was अभी जो हमने देखा था, what was another dichotomy during this period present? It was systematic versus regional. So are we clear about this much? Tell me fast. Systematic versus regional geography. Okay, I'll share, Sarfaraz, I'll share the link. Class के बाद मुझे याद दिलाना, I'll share my number with you. You send their request and I'll share that link with you there. Okay. Systematic versus regional geography. So till here it should be clear. Then we enter into the intermediate modern period. Intermediate modern period. And intermediate modern period में this period was between the world wars. Between the world wars. Again, the focus remained at Anglo America, and one more school of thought during this period which developed was the Russian school. It began to emerge during this period. ठीक है. And Anglo America में two most important people that we will see, it was, one was Hartshorne, Richard Hartshorne, and the second was Carl Sawyer. ठीक है. Hartshorne we will see he was a determinist or environmental determinist. Sawyer was more of the possibilistic tradition. We will see, however, both of them were regional in nature. Both of them were regional geographers. ठीक है. So if I just have to compare, Hartshorne was follower of Hettner, while Carl Sawyer was follower of Otto Schluter. देखा है हमने Schluter के बारे में. So he was follower of Otto Schluter. So do you remember? Can you compare what was happening in the German school of in the American school of thought? जैसे हमने देखा यूरोप में what was happening? Tell me, did we see that in the यूरोपियन जहां पर डोमिनेंस था यूरोप में, it was starting from the 1850s to the late 19th century. And did we saw that here what was happening in the first half of this period, there was no fixed position But in the second half, there was fixed position with respect to regional geography. Do you remember this? Did we saw that both Hettner and Schluter were regional geographers? Yes or no? So initially हमने क्या देखा था? For example, German school में did we saw in the German school there were both systematic, there were both regional, दोनों ही थे, and they were fighting for supremacy. But later on we saw that in the last 2 decades, ultimately German school was dominated by regional geography. Same thing यहाँ पर हो रहा है in American school. Same thing is taking place. In the first 2 decades of 20th century in American school, there was both were dominant. Some systematic geographers were also dominant, and parallelly there were some regional geographers also very much dominant. But as you enter in the second part, that is intermediate part, that is between the world wars, you will find that again there was supremacy of what? There was supremacy of regional geography, because both the people who were dominant scholars, both of them were regional geographers. One was Richard Hartshorne and the other was Carl Sawyer. ठीक है? Yes, Retzel was also in the first half, we are saying. So that is what here we are talking about. This is after these people, Carl Sawyer, Whittlesey and Hartshorne. These 3 people are present when in the interwar period they were dominant. In the interwar period, and up to some extent even in 1950s. ठीक है? So if you talk about Carl Sawyer, he was an activist of the possibilistic school in United States during the interwar period. He was very much influenced by Schluter's concept of cultural landscape, which implied that changes which were brought in natural landscape by influence of cultures and civilization. So he attempted to study cultural landscape in order to develop a theory of cultural influence. In order to develop किया या नहीं ये नहीं लिखा है. You see here, it is not written whether he developed or not. He wanted to develop a theory of cultural influence on natural landscape. Thus he started a paradigm in America which is referred to as cultural determinism paradigm, where culture becomes the dominating factor. ठीक है? Initially Sawyer tried to focus on the study of culture and influence on natural landscape, passing through several stages into cultural landscape. However, later he realized the inherent difficulties in this approach and thus focused on human influences on landscape. To him, humans represented the latest change in fashioning of the landscape. According to him, systematic organization of the content of landscape proceeds with theory building. Thus, he tried to develop a morphological method which was representative of here it is written by mistake systematic approach, it is regional approach. लिखो यहाँ पर, वो गलती से आ गया. Not systematic but regional approach. So correct it. Now I'll explain what he was essentially trying to do. So Carl Sawyer actually belonged to the America. Maybe we will later see that there were number of schools, sub-schools within. So Carl Sawyer is actually associated with what we call it as the Berkeley School of American Geography. So Berkeley School was the area of California. ठीक है? So you can understand the story of California. पढ़ा है California, the land of gold, very famous. So initially in Americas, most of the population, still lots of population is still concentrated where? Along the Atlantic coast and the Great Lakes. So that means towards the east. But later what happened? it was found that in California there are some alluvial rivers which have alluvial gold, and California was an area which had lots of resources, and the eastern, that is the Atlantic coast, and these areas were becoming very congested. So slowly what happened, people began to migrate towards California again to realize their great American dream. Okay. So California was a place which had a distinct humanistic influence, a possibilistic influence. Okay, and here there was development of the Berkeley School. Very important member of this Berkeley School was Carl Sawyer. So Carl Sawyer was very clearly, he was of possibilistic tradition. And if you talk about possibilistic tradition, अगर मुझे possibilistic traditions में जाना है, तो can I say I can go back to number of people like Vidal. So he was actually influenced by Vidal. He was influenced by others, like he was influenced by the works of Ritter. Yes, Last Ranger में था. If you talk about he was influenced by several other scholars who were there who talked about possibilism. But very clearly in all of these, can I say even Ritter, even Vidal, they wanted to formulate what? They wanted to formulate the science of geography. All of them wanted to formulate the science of geography. Although their method was regional, but they still wanted to formulate what? General laws. Reach to those general laws. Okay? Vidal maybe will later see that he also wanted to reach to those general laws. Okay? So tell me, can I say this same thing would have been adopted by Sawyer? Sawyer adopted this. His story was very much like Ritter actually. So Sawyer actually adopted the Otto Schluter's approach. Otto Schluter's approach. Okay, and what was the Otto Schluter's approach? If you remember, he talked about that, about the land shaft getting converted to as culture applied to it, it was converted to culture land shaft. Okay. So it was actually Carl Sawyer who translated the term land shaft into English. He used the term land shaft into English and he called it as landscape. Okay. So here landscape was natural landscape. So he directly adopted Otto Schluter's idea, and where there was culture, application of culture, and this led to development of a cultural landscape. So this same idea of Schluter was adopted by Sawyer. And he also adopted a kind of tradition which was there in Vidal and Ritter. And what was that tradition? The tradition was simple: to reach to science. If you remember, Ritter ka was saying, what was that saying of Ritter? What was that famous statement of Ritter? The whole is reflected in all its parts. So what you do, you study the parts and you ultimately understand the whole. You find the common things in the parts and you ultimately reach to the whole. So initially when Sawyer was developing his concept, his basic idea was to reach at a theory of culture. Okay, to reach at a theory of culture. Like for example, tell me, can I say that can I reach to a theory of culture where I can say that how this natural landscape is converted to cultural landscape? Can we say that, for example, human beings were initially, this has passed through the case of primary activities to ultimately secondary activities to ultimately tertiary activities? Yes or no? Tell me. Even primary activities में they were like, first initially they were hunters and gatherers. They ultimately became what? There was sedentary agriculture. From sedentary agriculture, they ultimately went to subsistence agriculture. From subsistence agriculture, then ultimately came the commercial agriculture. And from here, they moved towards industrialization. And even in industrialization, tell me, can I say there were steps in industrialization? Yes or no? First, can I say focus was towards basic goods industries? Then there was consumer oriented or consumer goods industries, and then there is the case of services. Okay. So tell me, can I say that there is particular stages in this transformation of Erlandschaft or natural landscape to a cultural landscape? Yes or no? So what was the original idea of Sawyer was to develop a theory on this transformation, the stages of transformation, how it occurs in an area. But when he started to extensively study the areas, cultures of the world, he found that there was actually too many varieties to be found to ultimately reach to such a conclusion. And thus later on he abandoned this idea and mostly focused upon what? Description of the morphological characteristics and the changes which have taken place in that region or in that cultural landscape or cultural region. Landscape here means what? Region. Okay? And when I am using the word morphological characteristics are mostly the visible characteristics of the landscape. The things which can be seen, like cultural traditions which can be seen, whether it is related with the dress we wear, whether it is related with the places of worship, whether it is related with the architecture, whether it is related with how the cities are framed, whether it is related with the economic aspect of the area. Okay? So ultimately, finally, what he settled for, instead of going for formulating a theory, which was his original objective, like Ritter, he also wanted to reach to that science, but he couldn't do so like his predecessors, because he ultimately found that there is too much actually variety. So what he reached to, what was his task? It was basically, he attempted morphology of landscape. Morphology of landscape. Okay? And this is actually also name of the book which was written by him, Morphology of Landscape. And in Morphology of Landscape, what he tries to show, that how a natural landscape through application of culture gets converted to a cultural landscape. Okay? So when he is doing morphology of natural landscape, he would take into account which elements? Can I say he would take into account elements like topography, elements like climate, elements like drainage, elements like vegetation, elements like soil, elements like fauna? Yes or no? When he is doing morphology of cultural landscape, he would take into account number of other things like the places like if you talk about the architecture, other things like for example economic characteristics, other things like for example the cuisines or eating habit, other aspects like variety of political aspects which had developed, other things like variety of traditions which are followed by the people, ठीक है, etc. So many things he would take into account. So he was attempting what? Morphology. And here very clearly you understand morphology term. Morphology is something which can be directly seen. ठीक है. So here they were the focus, although it was possibilism, although it was about study of culture, but the focus was on what? The things which could be directly seen. Many cultural aspects we can see. Like for example, if I talk about the in Hinduism, like for example, if I talk about, we worship many gods. There is so many. There is multi-theism in case of Hinduism. Yes or no? Definitely it is there. So many gods are worshipped. So many types of traditions are found in Hinduism. All these things are what? They can be seen directly. But can I say culture would also have some unseen aspects which cannot be directly seen but only felt? Yes or no? They can only be felt. Like for example, can I say that if I for example discuss with 10 people, even like for example here some of you are watching the class and I can see that I am so much surprised, even just it is like 1/3, not even 1/3 people are watching the class. Rest pata nahi kahan so rahe hain, whatever the case, I don't know. ठीक है. So if I ask you what is your opinion on God, can I say that different people will give their different type of opinions on God? Yes or no? So this is what? This is the invisible aspect of culture, the feelings of the people, the values, the behavioral traits. ठीक है. So tell me, was Carl Sawyer focusing on study of these invisible traits of culture? Did he try to study these invisible traits of culture? Answer is no. He didn't try to study these invisible traits of cultures. ठीक है. But still we can say that there was some cultural geography humanism present in his thoughts. It was essentially a cultural geography, and that is why we are talking about here cultural determinism. ठीक है. So the forms which are present, they are product of what? The needs of culture. That is why it is cultural determinism. Culture is determining what the people will be doing. Like you see in India, there is so much. If you go in the villages, up to cities, maybe there is lots of influence. We are going like opposite direction. So there is so much of cultural determinism. You have to think even. If you have to criticize, suppose अभी मैं criticize करने लगूँ government को, तो there will be people कि why only government and why only Hinduism. So you have to actually think, because such type of culture has ultimately pervaded. If you go in the village areas, people like low caste, etc., they are not even treated as human beings. They are treated as like something like slave or animals. Whatever they want to do, they cannot do. So much is the influence of culture. You talk about women in world, in India, and you can understand how much they have been exploited in this name of culture. Okay? So he started a tradition where culture becomes the dominating factor of how the morphology of the landscape would be seen. ठीक है, लाइक फॉर एग्जाम्पल एक छोटा सा एग्जाम्पल देता हूं, बाद में हम पढ़ेंगे मॉर्फोलॉजी ऑफ विलेजेस इन इंडिया. ठीक है, morphology of villages in India. Ka is saying, I am really sorry sir, it is really difficult for me to understand what shall I do to get it. You don't have to do anything, you just have to keep on memorizing at this point of time, and many things would become clear as we take up the topics. So don't be bothered, this is just a kind of glance we are having over what is about to come. This will come in more detail and there you will understand. Okay, coming back, if I give an example of cultural determinism, का एक example देता हूँ, which we will study later on. So if I study the structure of Indian village, we will find that in Indian village there is a central place which is referred to as khas gaon, and this is very common in the northern Indian plains. Khas gaon. This khas gaon, if you talk about, is surrounded by working caste. Khas gaon is the place where the upper caste, the servants of the village are living. ठीक है, so there is working caste, and there is, particularly if you go in eastern India, this would be present where? This would be present like eastern Uttar Pradesh, Bihar particularly. This is your outcast, which are not given place in the village, and they would always be present towards west, because in those areas the winds are easterly winds are present. So the winds should be what? Pure. They should not pass over these people, otherwise they would become impure. That is why they are never given place here. On the eastern side, they are given place where? On the western side, and they are not part and parcel of the village. In fact, there would be a kind of green belt which would separate them from the main village. So can you see how here the hierarchy of caste is determining? Yes, we will see later on that it is real. I have seen this with my eyes. I have seen this discrimination which occurs with my own eyes. ठीक है, yes, I think because of Navratra there is people who are breaching my privacy. Unfortunately, I cannot do much for this breach of privacy which they are trying to do, because you can understand that maybe I will be lynched in the name of religion. Okay, so I am really sorry if it is disturbing you. Okay. So this is basically what? This is the case of, can I say this is clearly the case of cultural determinism? How, see how culture is determining the evolution of the landscape. How the landscape is designed according to the needs of the culture. And here in India, it is the Varna system which ultimately is determining factor. So can you understand now this idea of cultural determinism? Yes, that is Carl Sawyer. Okay, for you. But at the same time, there was an opposite viewpoint, and this was presented by Richard Hartshorne. And Richard Hartshorne, famous geographer, he is credited with the creation of paradigm of very important term, areal differentiation in US. He wrote a book, very good book, this Nature of Geography. He reviewed the various approaches which have been prevalent in geography. He emphasized that if geography was to save its status as a discipline, it had to focus on the concept of regions, as the theme of regionalization is exclusive to geography. So, it had to focus on the concept of regions. So, areal differentiation was what? It was nothing but the application of regional approach. And more specifically, which approach? It was actually he adopted chorology from Hettner. So he was contemporary of Sawyer. So Sawyer का हमने क्या देखा? Sawyer adopted the regional approach of Schluter, and here Hartshorne had adopted the regional approach of Hettner. जैसे उन दोनों के टाइम में there was both were contemporary and debating with each other. Here also this debate was going on between Hartshorne and Sawyer. So he was follower of Hettner, as theme of regionalization is exclusive to geography. He was influenced by Kant. He further propounded that regions can be framework where synthesis of all the prevailing approaches within geography can be achieved. याद है हमने बात किया था regional synthesis term. So that term of regional synthesis. Thus he propounded the concept of regional synthesis. Hartshorne was determinist and saw environment as having huge influence on human activities. ठीक है? So how he was contradicting with, if you talk about with Sawyer, how he was contradictory with Sawyer? Although both were regional, the way of regionalization was different. One, two, Sawyer was a possibilist and he was a determinist. Can you understand the difference between Hartshorne and Sawyer? Tell me. Just 1 minute, let me 1 minute check. Okay. So that is the basic difference between them. So that is basically Richard Hartshorne, and we'll see that his debate with this person, ये जो नीचे लिखा हुआ Schaeffer, has been crucial significance in shaping the way in the discipline of geography developed later on. And we'll see that in the debate actually it was Schaeffer who won, and as a result geography left or discarded the regional approach and adopted systematic approach. This period we'll see 1950 के बाद का, the period is referred to as the quantitative revolution period. ठीक है? So earlier he was opposed to the paradigm of quantitative revolution as he favored opposite, that is areal differentiation, that is regional approach. However, by late 60s he supported the quantitative revolution approach as it has been successful in averting the crisis of late 40s and 50s in the post World War period. We'll see what is the meaning of that. अभी मैं इसको समझाता हूँ. But that was Richard Hartshorne. Another person during this period who was important was Wittelsay. So there is directly one topic mentioned in our syllabus, agricultural regionalization. ठीक है? So agricultural regionalization was given by Wittelsay. So he was another person who adopted the cultural determinism theme, that is possibilistic theme paradigm. यहाँ पे determinism लिखा हुआ है, but we will later see that it is a kind of possibilism. He developed the concept of sequent occupant. Sequent occupant is what? That means if someone is occupying the area or a culture is occupying the area, there would be sequence of occupancy which would occur with time. Like अभी हमने sequence बनाया था. Did you saw that sequence? Can you see this sequence of occupancy, how it was changing? Yes or no? That sequence of occupancy, how it is changing. And with this change in the sequence of occupancy, what will happen? The landscape would also undergo change. Okay, so he propounded this conception of sequent occupants. It recognizes the fact that any changes in the generative was culture of a region, inevitably leads to reappraisal of resource base of the region, and thus affects resource exploitation and morphology of the region itself. Like for example, you can understand, before the Americans arrived in America or the Europeans arrived in America, can I say there were real people who were the original inhabitants of the area were the Red Indians? Yes or no? They were the Red Indians, and their understanding of the resource was different because their technology and culture was low. So same resources they couldn't have seen. For example, Appalachians is an area where there is huge coal resources, but to them it was not coal, to them it was just a black rock. But when the Europeans arrived, ultimately what happened? They reassessed the resource base because their technology was superior. And with that we know that how the landscape ultimately changed. New type of culture emerged. So it studies the way in which each culture uses the region in its own ways. In the past, USA was inhabited by Red Indians living in primitive stage of development. With the advent of Europeans, they reassessed resources, so it developed into one of the most developed civilization of the world. Okay? In Africa, for example, there has been tendency of countries to shift their capital. So many countries are shifting their capital towards the interior. You must be aware that, for example, Myanmar, take example of Myanmar in Southeast Asia. So Myanmar, earlier the capital was Yangon, but now it is Nay Pyi Taw, which is in the interior Myanmar. So why they shifted? In order to ensure that the occupancy changes in the area. As the occupancy changes in the area, what will happen? Development will follow. Yes, Andhra Pradesh also recently. Development will follow. Okay? That is, capital built in underdeveloped areas along with new occupants will create growth pole here. Okay? In early 1950s, he headed a committee on regionalization. Very important hai, later we will again see this, and was tasked to come up with suitable methods of regionalization. So he came up with concept of compage. Compages. बाद में देखेंगे what is a compage. Basically, compage was a way of chorology, but it was not the true chorology which Hettner had propounded or Hartshorne was propounding. It was a kind of more practical form of chorology. ठीक है, where the हमने क्या देखा था chorology में all the elements were to be chosen in a sequence. Okay, so he was of the view in compage that you be more practical. A person cannot go for all the elements. So according to the purpose, you choose some of the elements. ठीक है, this approach he had already identified in his classification, the type of agriculture, the typology. See here, world typology of agricultural regions. So he had already used this approach when he was formulating his typology of world agricultural region, and in his we'll see that it was based upon type of agriculture, input, purpose of production, structure of agriculture. All these factors he took into account, and only on these factors what he did, he created this typology, divided the world into agricultural regions. Okay? And later when he became the head of the committee, he came up with the idea of compages. So this was the work of Whittlesey. Okay? So Whittlesey was very, very clearly a kind of mix of Hartshorne and Sawyer. Tell me how. if I say Wittelsay was more of a mix of Hartshorne and Sawyer. His approach was the middle path between Hartshorne and Sawyer. How? Mix of, middle path नहीं कह सकते, mix is better term. Anyone? So can I say he adopted the possibilism, or his approach towards human environment relationship was more similar to Sawyer? He was possibilistic. Yes or no? He was possibilistic. ठीक है. So if you talk about Carl Sawyer, very importantly, he is going for possibilism plus partial chorology. So possibilism he adopts from where? Sawyer लिखा है मैंने, sorry, it is actually Wittelsay. So possibilism he adopts from, or it is similar to Carl Sawyer, and chorology is similar to whom? Hartshorne. So he represents what? A mix between both. ठीक है. So in the intermediate modern period, three people I will remember, three names that I will remember. These are from the American school. It is Sawyer, Wittelsay and Hartshorne. बात समझ में आ गई? Let us move on. ठीक है. So we'll see later on there was another person, he was Schaefer. He was mainly an economist. So bahar wala aa gaya, you see. But also took classes of economic geography. So he was like an outsider to geography, and we have seen whenever outsiders come, what they do, they take extreme positions. They forget the balance because they haven't been taught, they haven't been trained in that tradition of geography which is based upon balance. ठीक है. So Schaefer was trained in tradition of positivism and saw geography to be lacking scientific temper. You know, he was economist, and one of the social sciences which is very much developed like a science which is very quantitative, which has been quite quantitative, it was economics. So he had been trained more in that scientific tradition. बाद में देखेंगे this tradition is referred to as positivism, and thus he tried to implement similar type of thing in geography as well. So he wrote a paper, Exceptionalism in Geography, and in this paper he criticized the exceptionalist viewpoint of Hartshorne. We have seen Hartshorne adopted this view from two people. कौन से दो लोगों से adopt किया था? He adopted this view from where? From Kant and Hettner. ठीक है. So we will see that he was of the view, he was also, in a way he was correct also, that this exceptionalism claim can be made by any discipline. All disciplines can say that I am doing something unique. So what geographers are doing, it is not something unique, just they are arrogant people. And this arrogancy is what? It is a barrier in geography becoming science. So he was of the view that geographers should leave this arrogancy, that is, leave regional geography, regional approach, and adopt the systematic approach and try to formulate laws, models, and theories which are universally applicable. Okay? And there was a debate, we'll see, between Schaeffer and Hartshorne. In this debate, it seems that Hartshorne was given more prominence. And ultimately, what was the outcome? The outcome was that after the World War, that is particularly after 1950s, there was development of the QR. QR was quantitative revolution in geography. नाम से ही पता चल रहा है, they tried to make geography as what? More quantitative discipline, more science-like discipline during this period, following the advocacy of Schaeffer. ठीक है, we have already seen this period was कब से कब तक था? Quantitative revolution remained in geography in between 1950 to 1970. ठीक है. So this is how the American school has developed. Later developments अभी बताऊंगा American school के, because whatever later developments we have to study, it is basically American school development. But before that, just let us look into very quickly Russian school. So Russian school of thought. So like the American school, it was filled with dichotomies and dualisms. Here two dichotomies, dualisms were present: determinism versus indeterminism and physical geography versus human geography. There was two type of dichotomies and dualisms which were present here. Okay? And there were number of people who were there, like for example, before the Russian Revolution, there was this P. Semenov, Kropotkin. So he is referred to as the grandfather of Russian geography. He was influenced by Richthofen and was humanist in approach and emphasized socialistic geography, which would focus on the study of inequality in space. Thus, he started the welfare paradigm in the Russian school, which stressed upon study of social relevance in geography and quality of life. He was Kropotkin. If you talk about very important नाम है, इसको याद रखना है. If you have to remember one name from Russian school, this is very important. Kropotkin. He was an anarchist tradition geographer and is believed to have introduced radicalism. हमारे syllabus में radicalism है. So we'll see origin of radicalism can be seen in the works of Kropotkin in contemporary Russian school of geography. He was influenced by philosophy of Reclus. Reclus was another person of the French school who was similar type of anarchist in tradition. Both of them were geographers of pre-Russian Revolution. Then there was Russian Revolution, and after Russian Revolution, number of changes occurred. See, what was the case of Russia? Can I say Russia is a land of great difficulties? Yes or no? It is although very big, very largest country of the world, but it still is very cold. It is an area of very great difficulties, we can say. Now, in this kind of situation where physical environment is dominant, can I say that there would be natural tendency among geographers to study physical geography and adopt determinism? Yes or no? Will there be natural tendency among the people, among the scholars, to study more the physical environment and adopt more deterministic ideas? Yes. It would be natural. But suppose if they are allowed to adopt such negative ideas, negative feelings, can I say would Russia have had become what Russia is today? A very developed industrial economy. could Russia would have been able to reach to its present status? Definitely no. Okay. So we will see that in Russian school, what was the case? There were such scholars who were naturally inclined towards physical geography and determinism. But in Russia, state sponsored, that means government sponsored, a very extreme form of possibilism, which जो हमने अभी ऊपर लिखा था, indeterminism or economic determinism was professed. ठीक है? This that we were talking about here, can you see here? This indeterminism. This indeterminism can also be referred to as economic determinism, which is a kind of extreme form of possibilism. ठीक है, this type of possibilism was professed purposefully by the state. ठीक है, very clearly. Why? Because they've tried to teach to people that all these environment etc. is nothing, and what ultimately determines the life of people, it is the economic needs, which are the primary factors which should determine the activities of the human beings. ठीक है, so it was very clearly oriented towards that. Similarly, economic geography was one area which was promoted by the state following this economic determinism. So again, because of that, there is this dichotomy dualism between determinism, indeterminism, physical geography versus human geography or economic geography. Can you understand the context of this? Yes or no? This was the essential context of why this dichotomy existed. Naturally, they should have been inclined towards physical geography and determinism, but artificially state was trying to impose indeterminism and human geography. Okay. So let us see some names. Here I'm just going through some important names, like for example, you should know about Dukashev. So Dukashev was systematic geographer and extensively contributed to soil geography. And बाद में हम एक classification पढ़ेंगे, zonal classification of the soils. So it was given by American scholar Marbut, but Marbut was actually translating what was the work of Dukashev. ठीक है, his views on human environment were more balanced as he was influenced by the ecological approach. Thus, he saw man as an agent of change within certain limits. Before him, this Vaikov, he was more of a physical geographer, okay, and he also had possibilistic tendencies. There were others like Mechnikov, he was determinist by tradition and saw rivers as synthesis of all geographical conditions. So river basin was ultimate. It was river basin which was determining all the cultural factors. ठीक है, इसी तरह से there was Plenkov etc etc. बहुत सारे नाम हैं, not very important to us. Very important person to us is this person, Anuchin. Anuchin from Russian school. If I have to remember one name, I will remember the name of Anuchin. ठीक है. In fact, before Anuchin, it was Bransky. So you see, Bransky was economic geographer who ridiculed the philosophy of environmental determinism as being theoretically unsound. He was more in favor of economic determinism and saw that inequality was on the face of the earth was result of human activities. ठीक है. However, he also tried to assimilate the factors of natural environment which create a limit on human activities. Thus, he tried to propagate a more balanced view of man-nature relationship, which later came to be known as neo-determinism. So, Bransky. Similarly, another neo-determinist was Anuchin. He developed the concept of neo-determinism. To him, nature or characteristic of environment were result of interrelationship between man and environment. He saw fault in the philosophy of determinism as because it was more mechanical, cause effect. Okay, so it was very mechanical, as the determinists saw certain influences producing certain consequences. Okay, it is not always necessary. Human beings are so much have variety in the human beings. For example, we normally say that mountainous topographies would be associated with underdevelopment. Yes or no? These are harsh topographies associated with underdevelopment. But tell me about Japan. Can I say Japan? Isn't Japan an exception? Don't you feel it is an exception? Yes. So how can you say that the law is applicable? Yes, same thing with Norway, Sweden, Finland, all those areas are also mountainous. Okay. So he saw that it was too much mechanical to account for the human variety which is found. Anuchin felt that man-nature relationship was more complex than the simplified view of determinism. But at the same time, he saw indeterminism, which they were trying to develop in Russia, to be too anti-scientific, as it was very idealistic view of the world, arrived from perspective of subjective idealism. Many things which you say, they don't make any sense. Like for example, someone says that no matter what we'll be able to do. Like for example, तुम लोगों के एग्जाम्पल से चलें तो तुम लोगों के जो प्लान्स, स्टडी प्लान्स होते हैं, ठीक है. सो इनडिटर्मिनिज्म वाज लाइक व्हाट इकोनॉमिक डिटर्मिनिज्म, इनडिटर्मिनिज्म विच दे प्रोफेस्ड इन रशिया, दे वर लाइक योर स्टडी प्लान्स. सो जब एग्जाम पास आ जाता है तो व्हाट इज योर लाइक योर स्टडी प्लान्स? 1 week इंडिया ईयर बुक, 3 days इकोनॉमिक सर्वे, ऐसे करके प्लान बनते हैं. फिर क्या होता है? इंडिया ईयर बुक देखा और बेहोश हो गए. सो इट इज बेसिकली व्हाट? इट इज हाईली अनरियलिस्टिक. सो इनडिटर्मिनिज्म अकॉर्डिंग टू अनुचिन वाज आल्सो व्हाट? इट वाज like that highly idealistic type of view, that they were talking about that we'll be able to create in this and that in Russia. Can you see that Russia, despite having superior technology, still has not been able to retain its status? Today Russia is facing so much of economic problems, and one of the basic economic problem arises from where? From the limitations posed by the environment. Can we agree on this? Yes or no? So he also had problem with the indeterminism. He saw it to be very idealistic view, and thus he felt that indeterminism sharply separates human society from environment. So it was creating a kind of separation between human and environment, and thus he saw it as anti-geographical concept. So he saw that it was not a geographical concept. Thus he also was what? He was also very important propounder of neo-determinism. Can you understand why I am saying these names are important? I'll explain you why. I have given in test questions like neo-determinism. Write a short note on neo-determinism. ठीक है. Suppose I give you another question. Write a short note on stop and go determinism. Can I say the answers in both would be little different? Can I say stop and go determinism is a subset of neo-determinism? Yes or no? Isn't it a subset of neo-determinism? So when I am writing about stop and go determinism, I will mention mainly about Griffith Taylor. Yes or no? Can I say, however, when I am writing on neo-determinism, will I not write about, okay, I'll write about Griffith Taylor, I'll write about Anuchin, I will write about Bransky. Yes or no? That is why the name is very, very important. There are others also who try to profess such balanced views. So we can become more inclusive when we are writing a more broader concept of neo-determinism. ठीक है. Similarly, there was others like Porofsky, he was hardcore indeterminist. Gerasimov, he was again hardcore indeterminist or economic determinist. So these were the people who were more, you can say, state sponsored scholars. State sponsored scholars were there. Like you see many, अभी आजकल का टीवी खोल लो इंडिया में and you open the news channels and you can find so many Pokrovsky and Gerasimov talking on the news channels, so many of them. ठीक है, and they would come and ultimately praise कि वाह वाह गवर्नमेंट क्या काम कर रहा है and all those, they will give all type of logics. ठीक है, so these were that were basically Pokrovsky and Gerasimov. ठीक है, so that is the essence of the Russian school of thought. ठीक है, इतना समझ में आ गया. Now returning back to what happened in the American school. So as we saw that actually Second World War was very important period, and Second World War में हुआ क्या? In Second World War we saw that many scientific disciplines, they helped in war. Social sciences could not, and one such social science which could not help was geography. Could not help in war efforts. They were mostly doing what they were doing, choreography. Geographers were very much involved in choreography. Chorology तक तो पहुंच ही नहीं पाते थे, उससे पहले रिटायर हो जाते थे. We have already seen. So mostly geography had become a kind of encyclopedic discipline. Too much facts, figures, and less of understanding. So geography guided by such type of regional geography could not help in the war efforts. And society, we know, particularly the Western society is very materialistic society, and in such materialistic society, obviously questions would be asked by people, why then need to study geography? So the status of geography began to be questioned since the Second World War, and geography began to experience what? A crisis of identity. Crisis of identity. Okay, like you can understand that sometimes you don't get good results in the exam, and family members, rishtedar, your relatives, they would create a crisis of identity for you. They will create a situation like kya ho gaya and all those kind of things. Okay, so geography was facing such type of crisis of identity, and in such a scenario, it was Schaeffer who told geography that main problem is because you are not science. Okay, you are not science. Thus, geography should become what? Science. ठीक है. So what geography tried to do? Geography ultimately inculcated these developments and it adopted the quantitative revolution. Adopted quantitative revolution, and quantitative revolution was basically what? It was attempt of geography to become science. What is the key of science? Tell me. What is the key feature of science? Can I say science has number of features, like it has various laws, theories? Can I say these laws and theories, if you talk about of science, these laws and theories, are they universally applicable? Yes or no? Can these laws and theories be used to predict future? They can be used to predict future. All these are the qualities of science. ठीक है. So geography also tried to become what? This type of science. So we will see this was the period geography imported many theories and models within it, and many of these it tried to show that they are how universally applicable, and it tried to ultimately do what? Become more predictable. Become here. This means it tried to show that it was becoming science, thus it would become what? Applied. That means useful to the society. It would be, its concepts can be used in solving the problems of the society, with the society problems which was faced by society. ठीक है. So can you understand the essence of quantitative revolution? Tell me. But the problem was, when it comes to human beings, can you develop this laws and theories? Can you develop laws about humans? It is very difficult. Not possible actually with the amount of knowledge we have. We don't have the knowledge of the behavior of the people. ठीक है. So what they did, they excluded the human aspect. सीधा सा तरीका है कि like अभी हमारा government policies they are framing very well, how they are framing those policies. So other side of India doesn't exist, and India is like so much developing, etc., etc. ठीक है. So what we call it as India and Bharat. So for them it is only India. Bharat doesn't exist at all. So like this, the quantitative revolution scholars, what they did, they neglected the existence of all those subjective elements of human beings. Only what they took, the objective elements, economic elements. We'll see quantitative revolution was essentially what? It was based upon mostly economic concepts. ठीक है. So that was the period of quantitative revolution, but as we have seen, 1970s to late 1980s, quantitative revolution in geography was overthrown because of its generalizations. याद है, I explained you, I talked about that story of that deer and 3 geographers went for hunting. Do you remember that story? So how one geographer shot towards left, 5 meters left, missed the deer, another missed 5 meters from the right, and the third one started clapping ki we got the deer, because plus minus 5 minus 5 is equal to 0. So geography theories were like that. They were more on paper rather than in the real world. ठीक है. So they were more on the paper, and what is there on the paper, it would be, if you talk about application and using that idea to help the society to solve the problems of society would be difficult. Okay. So we'll see that late 60s was the period when lots of drama began to unfold in the world, and particularly America. So if you talk about late 60s was a very chaotic period. Already in late 60s there was Cold War was at its peak, peak. Globally there was so much problems which were ongoing. Like for example, there was human rights violation in Vietnam. There was human rights violation in Vietnam which occurred. There were other problems like there was racial problem in US. Blacks were discriminated. So there was a movement which started in favor of blacks. Civil war kind of situation developed in US. So racial problems were there in US. There was inequality problem. This was the period when environmental problem began to come to the fore. People started to recognize that we are destroying the environment at very fast pace. Okay. So environmental problem came to the fore. Amit is saying Indo-Pak Sino wars. क्या बात कर रहा है यार. इंडिया और पाकिस्तान एंड उस दैट टाइम चाइना, उनकी क्या औकात थी. हियर वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट बिग पीपल. ठीक है. वी आर नॉट स्टडिंग हियर इंडियन ज्योग्राफी. हियर वी आर स्टडिंग अमेरिकन ज्योग्राफी बेसिकली. ठीक है. सो इट हैज एक्चुअली नथिंग टू डू विथ Indo-Pak and whatever China. China has become big today, no doubt. But at that time, you'll see China was also struggling with its own problems. And India, already it is a joke, and if I say more jokes, some people might even die with laughter. So I'll not take that risk of going to jail. It is really like a joke. Yes, Cuban crisis, you can say, it was there. That we boast ourselves so much. And we are becoming, like I always used to say, because I remember myself being a teacher for almost 10 years. So in my initial days as a teacher, I used to say that Americans are the most deluded people on earth. Most deluded people. Most brainwashed people on earth. But unfortunately now I have to accept that we are very nearly closing on them, even surpassing them. So it has been like this. ठीक है. So छोड़ते हैं अब इसको बात को. Yes, like we voted for Indian Trump. Okay. So late 60s was what? Very chaotic period. And in all these problems, it was like geography scholars were more like sleeping. They couldn't do anything. Their theories which they had made for 2 decades, they were found to be not useful. They couldn't solve the problem of Cold War. They had no answer to human right violation. They had no answer to the racial problem. They had no answer to inequality problems or environmental problems. It was just waste. All those theories, it was seen. And under such some circumstances, a strong criticism began to emerge, and we will later see this criticism became a movement, and this movement is referred to as the social relevance movement. So in academics, there was this social relevance movement which emerged, and this social relevance movement was basically what? If you talk about, to ensure that the academics, the disciplines, the education becomes more relevant to the society. That means it becomes more applied. It becomes, all these subjects become more problem solving disciplines. Okay? So they tried to include the type of studies which were more important for the society rather than theoretical things like plus my 5 minus 5 करने के बजाय you actually go and solve some problems. ठीक है? So that is basically what? That is the social relevance movement, and strong criticism emerged as a result of social relevance movement, and this criticism was essentially one of the basic reasons why QR was overthrown, beside other criticisms which emerged. Okay, this was also a period when there was emergence of humanism philosophy, and humanism philosophy simply is basically what? It simply believes that the human should be at the center of all development. So अभी मैंने बताया था ह्यूमन बीइंग्स क्वांटिटेटिव रिवोल्यूशन, व्हाट इट डिड? Quantitative revolution relegated humans to background. So humanism was very subjective philosophy, and it tried to criticize that no matter how much you neglect the subjective aspects of human beings, the values, the feelings, etc., but they are not going to, they are very important. In fact, they shape up human activities. I'll explain what is humanism. अभी एक example देके बताऊंगा. Just first see. Another was behavioralists or the behavioral approach, and they said, okay, if you want to make models and theories, no problem, but what you do, you combine objective reality with subjective reality, दोनों को combine करो and find a middle path and then make models and theories. So from them you find a middle path, and on the basis of this middle path formulate your models, theories and laws. So such type of models, theories and laws would be more applicable. समझ में आया behavioral approach? ठीक है? So that was one thing which was also criticizing. There was other things other people who were critical were welfare and the radical people who were criticizing QR. So they were saying that they were mostly focusing upon that everything should be based upon equality. Thus they were targeting inequality. ठीक है? And as we said, environmentalists were already there. So these were the main people who were criticizing. Environmentalists were already there. So these were the main people who were critical of the quantitative revolution, and as a result of this criticism, QR didn't remain the main philosophy. Thus what happened, as we said, between 1970s and late 80s, three philosophies together became dominant. जैसे अभी हमने देखा between 50s and 60s, between 50 and 70, one philosophy was dominant, quantitative revolution. But during this period, there were three philosophies simultaneously dominant. Three approaches, better right? Approaches simultaneously became dominant. And which were these three approaches? One was behavioral approach, other, if you talk about, was humanistic approach, and the third one was radical approach. Radical approach. So these were the three main philosophy, primary philosophies or approaches. बाकी जो दो बची, कौन सी दो बची इस टाइम पर? There is environmentalism and radical this welfare. ये दोनों they remained there but as a minor philosophies. ठीक है? The major one became these three. And what was the promise of these three? Tell me, what was the promise of, would have been the promise of these three? What they wanted to do with geography? Can I say they wanted to, their promise was कि अच्छे दिन आएंगे? That was their promise. Okay. So geography here, अच्छे दिन means that geography would ultimately become applied, problem solving discipline. So promise was to make geography or convert geography into a problem solving or applied discipline. Or applied discipline. But we will see that by late 80s it was very clear that they failed in their promise. They failed in their promise because of variety of reasons. हम बाद में देखेंगे more detail में. But they failed in this promise. ठीक है? And as a result of this failure, what happened? Period of late 80s to late 90s is a period of crisis in geography. Again, one crisis phase. Crisis in geography. And how this crisis, why this crisis was there? Because no single approach dominant. There were variety, too many approaches. That means there was no clear-cut direction. For research and development of discipline of geography. No clear-cut direction for research and development of discipline of geography. ठीक है? So this was the late 80s and 90s period. So there were too many approaches. और पहले भी बता चुका हूँ about this too many approaches. Already present approaches जो थी वो तो थी. That is, there was behavioral approach. It was already there. There was humanism. So humanism actually converted to here new cultural geography it became. This was the humanism before. So it converted to new cultural geography. Others, like there was radicalism, it had converted to structuralism by this time. So earlier it was radicalism. We'll see. New movements there were there, like post-modern movement was there. and emerged from this postmodern movement was a theme of feminism, which was highly critical of what was going on in geography. There was already presence of environmentalism. Even within environmentalism, we'll see variety of approaches were there. Okay, but environmentalism was there, and if you talk about already there was welfare approach. So इतनी सारी approaches. ठीक है, so many approaches. It is very similar to a civil services aspirant, a new aspirant coming to Karol Bagh and areas like old Rajendra Nagar, and again so many coaching institutes and getting confused कि किधर जाएं, कौन सा ज्वाइन करें. ठीक है, so that was the case in geography. Which direction geography should take towards future development, towards future research, that it was not clear at all. Everyone was criticizing each other, busy in criticism of each other. ठीक है, and out of this emerged one theme. This was the theme of environmentalism. So since late 90s, what has happened? There is the main dominant philosophy has become environmentalism. Geography is guided by environmentalism. ठीक है, so see, this is the way in which geography has developed over a period of time. All those people who have got a gist of this idea have made some kind of, see, I'm not expecting that at this point of time your mental picture would be very clear about what we have studied. But can I ask you that you have got some idea ki kaise, at least a blurred idea of how development has occurred within geography? Yes or no? Even if it is blurred, but एक idea मिल गया कि how it has developed. ठीक है, now what we'll do, because yes, it is a kind of a blueprint, a bird's eye view. ठीक है, so we have got a bird's eye view, an overview of things. Now we'll move on and we'll see that each of the themes and how in each of the themes, what is the depth of those, what are the variety of concepts related with those themes, what was the shortcomings, everything will be now seen. ठीक है, just I will now sum up this development process under one heading, that is, we'll talk about the paradigmatic development of geography. Paradigmatic development of geography. ठीक है, so first of all, what is this paradigm? अब हम इसकी बात करते हैं. What is the meaning of the term paradigm? So actually this paradigm, the theory of paradigms was given by a philosopher by the name of Kuhn and his associate Popper. So it was Kuhn and Popper who provided this theory of paradigms. According to them, what is a paradigm? Paradigm is a phase. It is a phase in development of a discipline where one perspective or approach becomes dominant and determines future research and development. Future research and development. ठीक है. So that is what we mean by the term paradigm. ठीक है. Are we clear about what is the paradigm? Paradigm is a phase. ठीक है. Like you know very well, this 2014 से लेकर के we can say that 2000 somewhere 18 तक there was अच्छे दिन paradigm in India and everyone was talking about अच्छे दिन आएंगे. But by the end of 2018 it was very evident that कि अच्छे दिन नहीं आएंगे. Thus, 2019 elections and new paradigm began to emerge, and these new paradigms were Mandir, Hindutva, such type of paradigms began to emerge. And you see very clearly that 2019 mein who was talking about development? Nobody. ठीक है. Yes, nationalism etc. जो भी सब फेसिज्म में होता है, whatever those things which occur in fascism, all those terminologies were adopted. Yes, very good. That was Pranit is correct. आत्मनिर्भर पैराडाइम आ गया. So whatever be the case, you can understand that it is basically what my basic idea is to make you understand what is a paradigm. It is a phase. Here we are talking about development of a discipline, and I am giving you development of a society. ठीक है. So such type of phase where one idea or approach becomes so much dominant that it fully determines the development of research, in which area the research would develop. ठीक है. So such a phase is referred to as paradigms. Now what happened? Kuhn and Popper extensively studied the history of sciences, particularly the general sciences. ठीक है. And what they found that general sciences development had occurred in these paradigmatic phases. ठीक है. So once a paradigm was established in general science, what will happen? All the research which is taking place during that paradigm period would be to prove that the basic philosophy is what it is correct. The basic approach, the perspective is what correct. Like अगर मैं example दूँ, tell me one example is the gravity. Suppose we are talking about gravity. Can I say, does the slab pull theory proves that gravity is true? The basic philosophy is what? Gravity, law of gravity. The slab pull theory proves that gravity is true. So when the paradigm is established, what will happen? Several such laws, theories, models would be formulated to prove that that paradigm is correct, that idea or the approach is correct. ठीक है. Thus when the paradigm is established, what will happen? There would be more additions in the knowledge rather than multiplication in the knowledge during that paradigm phase. There would be more increments, additions would be taking place rather than multiplication occurring. However, with time, there would be several exceptions which would begin to emerge. ठीक है, like plate tectonics theory. In geology, it became what? Paradigm. But with time, what we have found? So many inconsistencies began to emerge. It is still a paradigm in geology. But now we have more inconsistencies, we have more information about how many places it is unable to explain many phenomena. How there are so many shortcomings in plate tectonics. It says that there is plates are floating over asthenosphere. We find several places there is no asthenosphere to be found. Seismic wave studies have proved that. Okay. So with time, as maybe more information comes, we'll improve upon plate tectonics. We have already begun to improve. We are already talking about microplate tectonics. Okay. So that is how the sciences develop. Phase would be there. So according to them, what happens that in sciences there is, suppose there is the existing paradigm is present. So with time, what will happen? Several contradictions would begin to emerge. Initially, these contradictions would be suppressed. Okay. But with time, these contradictions would become more and more clear. And more people will join in. Okay. Thus, what will happen? These contradictions would lead to what we call it as a in fact crisis phase. It would lead to a crisis phase. Okay? And this crisis phase would provide several answers. And what is the key of crisis phase? There will be lots of questioning done to the existing paradigm. And from here, there would be emergence of several answers. And these answers would become what? The base of new paradigm. Base of a new paradigm. So ultimately, a new paradigm would emerge. So can you understand how the paradigms develop in disciplines? Particularly, this was the theory based on, originally it was based upon the general sciences, physics, chemistry, like these subjects. Okay. So this was the basic idea presented by Kuhn and Popper. Now Kuhn and Popper said number of other things. They defined the paradigm. So paradigm is always associated with, it would be always associated with, first at the top of the paradigm would be what? Paradigm would always be based upon an approach or perspective or philosophy. Okay, so it would always have an approach, perspective or a philosophy. Which would provide the guiding principles. These are basically what? The guiding principles for the paradigm. ठीक है? Are we clear about this? What is approach? हमने पहले भी देखा है. It is the macro idea. ठीक है. Always in paradigms, once the approach is established, what will happen? The paradigms would have several theories, models and laws. Models and laws would be formulated. They would be always formulated to prove the validity of the approach. Validity of the approach. ठीक है. So several type of theories, models and laws would be formulated to prove that this approach is valid. ठीक है. For example, you know that today we are trying to establish the religious political model that we are trying to establish in India. A model which is a combination of Hindutva and nationalism. And you can see how many theories and models they are already in the propounding. Like for example, very classic case of that is Ayush. You know, Ayush scheme of government of India, it is like more or less like what? Many of the things which they are forcing upon that being truth, they don't have actual validity. They don't have actual validity. And they are like, yes, वो कोरोनिल आ गया था वो रामदेव जी का, you know very well. Some are coming with their own hypothesis, you know, Gobar wala hypothesis and all those kind of things. So again, they try to keep on creating those kind of theories, models, laws through which the basic approach can be validated that it is correct. And it is very true in the paradigms. Then when paradigm is established, there would always be what? There would always be a associated methodology. Paradigms would always be associated, they would have a fixed method of work. Either they would follow a scientific methodology or they would follow philosophical methodologies. Even within scientific methodologies, they can follow inductive or deductive methodologies. Okay. Within philosophical, we'll see that either they would follow reductionist, either they would follow existential methodology or they would follow the idealistic methodology. Okay. So again, there also we will see that variety of type of methodologies would be there. But there would be a fixed methodology. So methodology would be what? It would be fixed. Okay. Also, it would be having some exemplars. It would be having some exemplars. Exemplars are what? Exemplars can be said to be symbols of that approach, something symbolic. So it is what? It is something which is symbolic or symbol of the approach. So tell me, can I say exemplar can be a book or a scholar? Yes or no? We can associate, like for example, if I take the name of Ratzel, tell me which approach comes to your mind. Which approach comes to your mind? Can I say a deterministic systematic approach comes to my mind? He is associated with determinism. Okay. So, deterministic systematic approach comes to our mind. So, these type of symbols of the paradigm are referred to as the exemplars. So, when a paradigm is established, there would always be like this type of situation. Okay? Then, after more research in other disciplines, they tried to apply, Kuhn and Popper tried to apply this same idea of paradigm and tried to study it in social sciences and other disciplines as well. And when they studied, they found some similarities, but they found also lots of variety and differences. Okay? So ultimately they came to conclusion, or they also talked about that what happens. One, when we are talking about paradigms, paradigms can be of many types. Types of paradigms can be there. Okay? And if we talk about these types of paradigms, first is, we can say always the first stage is non-paradigmatic, which is not a paradigm stage. Non-paradigmatic phase. Non-paradigmatic phase of development can be, and in all disciplines, initial phase was non-paradigmatic in nature. It was non-paradigmatic. What is the key feature of non-paradigmatic? Here the key feature is that one, there are no theories, models or laws to prove validity of the approach. There might be hypothesis, okay, but we have already seen hypothesis is not a theory. Theory is something which has been validated through empirical evidences. But in hypothesis, there is no such validification has taken place. Okay? So, that is one thing, feature on paradigmatic phase. Another important aspect is that in this period, scholars cannot separate the subject matter of their discipline from sister disciplines. They cannot separate the subject matter. For example, have we seen that, for example, how Herodotus was studying history, उसको हमने father of history बोला, but we were also talking about geography. Did we saw that same thing was applicable with respect to Kant? Kant, maybe we saw the same thing. He was more of a philosopher and we were also treating him as a geographer. So many things actually he was talking about generally, but we as geographers are saying it is also relevant for geography. Okay? So that this type of phase is a non-paradigmatic phase. So that is one thing. Then there can be a situation of what we call it as the dual paradigmatic. Dual paradigmatic phase. are there permanent, here Alvin is asking, are there permanent paradigms that never face the crisis stage? There will always be, there are no such paradigms, Alvin. In all disciplines, whatever knowledges we gather, they continue to face challenges and continue to get criticized, because you can understand that knowledge is not limited. It is knowledge is unlimited. We don't know to what extent knowledge is present. Maybe I very frequently say that knowledge is equal to God. Probably if we get all the knowledge, we'll become God. Okay, so we don't know. So as more and more knowledge we continue to gather, many previous ideas that we'll have, they would become what? Less important. Their relevancy would become lesser. ठीक है, अभी देखते हैं क्लासिकल पीरियड, ऑल दोज विल सी. सो वन स्टेज वुड बी व्हाट? डुअल पैराडाइमेटिक फेज. We will see classical period is essentially not a paradigmatic phase. We'll see why, बाद में देखेंगे. It is under non-paradigmatic. ठीक है. So dual paradigmatic phase में what will happen? नाम से ही पता चल रहा है, there are two approaches which are simultaneously dominant and even contradictory, and can be even contradictory. यहाँ पर can be लगा लो, and can be even contradictory to each other. So this type of phase is dual paradigmatic phase. There can be other situation where we can simply call it as monoparadigmatic. Monoparadigmatic phase. So नाम से ही पता चल रहा है, monoparadigmatic is what? Dominance of a single approach, of a single approach and finally there can also be a third, which we can call it as the multi-paradigmatic phase. Multi-paradigmatic phase, and in multi-paradigmatic phase what happens? More than two approaches are dominant. Approaches are dominant. ठीक है. So this type of phase can be referred to as multi-paradigmatic phase. So many types of paradigms can exist in disciplines. And see, sequence if we talk about, it is not necessary that they would always occur in this sequence. The only thing that would always occur first would be non-paradigmatic. It would always occur first. After that maybe multi-paradigmatic comes first and then dual paradigmatic, then monoparadigmatic, or like here the sequence I have written. Why I have written this specific sequence? Because we will see that in geography, the development of geography, if we try to look geography from this kind of multi-paradigmatic or from paradigms point of view, we'll see that the development in geography has occurred in this sequence. Initially there was non-paradigmatic phase, then there was this paradigmatic phase, dual paradigmatic, then monoparadigmatic, then again what we find there is multi-paradigmatic, and today again we are saying that there is return of kind of monoparadigmism. No, it is not necessary. That is what I am saying, Albin. It is not necessary this sequence is not fixed. Why I have written this particular sequence? Because geography has followed this sequence. Okay? But one thing is fixed, non-paradigmatic would be always first. ठीक है, सो हम देखेंगे, विल सी दैट इफ आई जस्ट क्लासीफाई ज्योग्राफी में, सो नॉन पैराडाइमेटिक periods, there was dual paradigmatic periods, there was mono paradigmatic periods, and there was multi paradigmatic period was there. So non paradigmatic में if I have to compare with the development of geography periods, I would say ancient period, then there are others, that is the medieval period, there is classical period, and the pre-modern we'll see, will classify under non-paradigmatic. ठीक है, I'll prove that tomorrow. Then dual paradigmatic में it would be early modern period and intermediate modern period. Monoparadigmatic, it was first part of late modern period, which was 50-60 decade, when quantitative revolution was present, if you remember. So this period is 1950 to 70, and multi-paradigmatic geography became when in the second part of the late modern period. And if you talk about here, it was 1970 to late 80s. And in a way, in geography again there is a kind of mono paradigmatic situation is emerging now. And today if you talk about, it is the period of environmentalism हम देखेंगे, and this has been since late 90s. दिस पीरियड अगर याद है तो हमने इसको बोला था पोस्ट मॉडर्न पीरियड of development. Deepti is asking, when paradigm means dominance of one approach, how it can be? Deepti, I will remind you that we just now studied that we just gave one definition of paradigm which was originally given by Kuhn and Popper. But later as they studied more disciplines, they redefined the meaning of the paradigms. And they themselves talked about that it is not necessary that there would be always one paradigm, one monoparadigmatic situation. There can be dual paradigmatic situation, there can be multi-paradigmatic situation. Is it clear, Deepti? Rishendra is asking, simultaneously there can be two paradigms at different places. Yes, if those places are connected with each other. ठीक है, like for example French and German school, so they were very near and connected to each other, so they belong to the European school. ठीक है, so we'll stop for today. My advice is for tomorrow, please, whatever we have done till now, revise that. And if you can revise, you'll see wonders will happen in this topic of perspectives in human geography. And I can understand your confusions because this topic is difficult, there is no doubt. I'll try my best to make sure that it becomes more easy. Here I was not going in explaining many of the phenomena, many of the confusions which you would have had in the mind. I knew many confusions were there in your mind. I didn't go into depth of explanation because we were already exceeding the time limit which we gave for this first part of discussion. And second important thing is, it is again going to come later on. So here the objective was to give ultimately what? A macro viewpoint of the development of geography, the themes which have been there in geography. And ultimately from now on we'll be taking those themes and we'll go into more depth of all these themes. जितने भी हमने terms use किए हैं, important names of people, we'll more associate with them with the themes and we'll study more in detail of them. Whenever I hear new name, I tend to forget old heard names. It is normal, yaar. It is very normal. Okay. So again I'll tell you that my number is 9910766829. This is my Telegram number. You can message me, all those who have newly joined. Okay. Yes, I remember. So as we said before in the initial classes that we'll be starting an answer writing class, and we'll try to make it 3 days in a week at least. Answer writing we'll be doing, and I would say that let us start with initially with oceanography, because most of you have been part of oceanography. So it would be essentially also mean that that topic is getting revised, the previous topic which has been dealt. So you are forced to revise that. Okay. If I start with oceanography, I know that most of you would be able to associate yourself. Okay. So we'll be starting with oceanography. So what we will do from tomorrow, we'll put some questions on the Telegram group. On the Telegram group. ठीक है. Initially इसको live नहीं रखते हैं, few days. Initially what we are going to do, we'll put on the Telegram group and already recorded class of 30 minutes where we'll discuss the model answers. Where we'll discuss the model answers. Okay. The idea is very simple. You will use these model answers to self-evaluate. After self-evaluation, if you feel that you are getting above 50% marks, okay, you are getting above 50% marks, then you can submit it to me for evaluation. Okay, Surajit, wait for some time. If you have joined new, all those people who have joined new, first come up with the pace with the classes. Oceanography will soon finish, so we'll start with this new topic which we are doing. Okay, so first get on pace with the classes and it would come. ठीक है. So that is basically submit. You have to, if you feel that 50% at least you are getting, then what you have to do, you have to submit it for self evaluation. Then you have to submit it for self evaluation, for evaluation by me. After self evaluation, if you have got this much, you feel. एक और चीज, warning, all those who try to become too smart and फालतू में, when you already know that what you have written is pathetic, and still just to show your answer to me and just submit your answer by just saying that I have written well 50%, भले ही कितना घटिया लिखा हो, I will put those people in blacklist. ठीक है. So don't try to be over smart in this. I have told before also, I have so much of workload. I am here teaching, like today I am teaching from 2 o'clock, 2 बजे से पढ़ा रहा हूँ, एंड ब्रेक नहीं मिला है मेरे को. 15 minutes, half an hour, इतना ही ब्रेक मिला है. एंड देन अगेन आई विल गो मेक सम क्वेश्चंस, राइट इवन सम आंसर्स. यू माइट बी नोइंग दैट डेली आंसर राइटिंग जो मैं 500 में करवा रहा हूँ, there I am even writing myself many answers I have written actually. ठीक है. So don't try to be over smart in this part. Self evaluation is the first step. ठीक है. Nitin is saying my messages are not getting delivered. I think I don't know why this problem. You try to send message through normal messaging. Criteria for self evaluation, model answer से पता चल जाएगा ना. You'll get the idea through model answer. 80% is content, all other trivial things later. ठीक है. द थिंग इज, अगर मैं 500 वाले क्वेश्चंस अभी इसमें डालने लगा तो प्रॉब्लम वुड बी दैट यू विल बी ओवरवेल्म्ड. सो आई डोंट वांट टू डू दैट. दोज ऑफ यू आर राइटिंग मेंस, you personally message me, I'll add you to another group where those messages are being shared. And those of you who are going to write next year, don't worry, वो questions and answers हम share करेंगे during our writing program. ठीक है. Now here Pranav is saying ALS that from where will the map work program start. I met with them, and one thing that still remains is the date to decide on the map work. Okay. So that is one thing. Maybe I am asking them to start from Monday, and this map work would be of 75 days. Okay, so I have given them the plan. The date is still to be decided, and 1-2 days I will tell you the date when it is going to start. How to submit answer sheets? You will submit these answer sheets on my number. यार देर इज जो टेक्निकल सपोर्ट के लिए लिंक इज हैज़ बीन गिवन. यू जस्ट मैसेज योर प्रॉब्लम्स, जो भी ऐप्स रिलेटेड थोड़ा बहुत प्रॉब्लम्स आ रहा है, यू जस्ट मैसेज इट देयर, दे विल सॉल्व द प्रॉब्लम. आई एम नॉट एन एक्सपर्ट इन दिस. आई एम लाइक नाइव इन टेक्नोलॉजी. सो मेरे से डिस्कस करने से कोई फ़ायदा नहीं है. ठीक है. सो इट इज़ 10:30 नाउ. आई विल स्टॉप फॉर टुडे. We'll continue this tomorrow. Yes, same map work which is going on in guidance, same map work will be starting in ALS also. Okay.